Hey everybody, and welcome back. Alright, so time for a new project. So we're going to spend today talking about the project, i.e. what it's going to be, what plans I have in terms of how to do it, what our goal is, and we'll take a look at what we have in the way of stuff to start it off and the stuff we'll need to finish it. So you might have a little hint from this here sitting there. We are going to build, as I promised before, a second Enfield 350 trials bike. So I decided, this isn't sort of a YouTube business or anything like that. As I mentioned over the years, basically all I do is treat the camera like having a mate in the workshop. You look over my shoulder while I'm working, which is why you see all the errors as well as the successes, and I just, as I do when my mates are here, I ramble on. So after the last project I thought, I've had it with wiring and lights and all the rest of it. So I think what I'm going to do now is we're going to make some specials, some specials. I enjoyed making the alloy tank for the other bike, and I enjoyed fabricating stuff, and it was very much a learning curve. I'd never made a complete frame, and the fact that it came out straight and square and it didn't break in two when I got on it, in the past you've seen me modify things, but I did that because if you're starting from something like the bulk of the frame, there's less chance of error. So anyway, that all came out fine. I've only ridden it a couple of times. It's still a little bit peaky. I think other riders will really enjoy it, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. So we're going to go a bit overboard, if you like. As I said last time, that after the Otter I wanted a simple project, and that obviously went out the window, partly because it was more complicated to do than I thought, and obviously a lot of it because we had so many stupid and mysterious problems. But anyway, I don't want to waffle too much now, because I'm going to waffle all the way through this video basically. But I really want to make this next Enfield different, and yet the same. Now, how cryptic is that? So what we're going to do, let's say first of all, is we're going to go over this, because I've been riding this a lot. What I like about it, what I don't like about it, and we're going to look at the Otter for comparisons, because we're going to do a lot of measurements and stuff like that, and from that we're going to decide what we're going to do to build the next one of these. So I'm going to build the frame and everything. Alright, so let's start off by lifting this up, and I'm going to point a few things out and talk a little bit about my take on trials bikes for me. Okay, now I'm very much a believer that form follows function, as the phrase goes. Although I want things to look nice, first of all, they've got to work well. Now, I had a couple of comments, for instance, about the strange silences I made. I think the only one really is the one on the Otter. There I had a couple of constraints. I was very limited on space, but I didn't think of that in terms of, oh, I'm limited on space, how am I going to make it look nice? I thought of it straight away as, I'm limited on space, how can I use that space so that the exhaust system will actually work properly? And then, once I decided, where it was going to be fat, where it was going to be thin, etc., then we could make it flow a little bit. So just the same with this. I've been riding this a lot. In fact, I have ridden this so much and come to like it so much that the Beta I just bought is going to go up for sale. I'm going to lose money on it, of course, but can't be helped, because it's just going to stand in the garage. I don't like riding it. I don't enjoy riding it. And that's because of the way I like to ride. This I've found, I love riding it. I go out on the Beta, I've been trying hard, but a few times I've even come back after 3 or 4 sections. I've just been so, disgusted about the way I'm riding it. And that's because the Beta is complicated and I'm not. This, put it in gear, first gear, and that's it. Everything is done with this. If I want more power rather than go faster, I can just give it as much as I need. Even going downhill most of the time, it's on engine braking, you don't even need to use the brakes. But the Beta is constantly, as a friend Mike tells me, you've got to be able to use all 3 controls at once, i.e. throttle, brake and clutch, or brakes and clutch. I'm going to be honest, I can't do it. It's as simple as that. It's like my golf. My short game, putting, chipping up, from 100 yards is great because there's not much to think about. Driving, put the ball here, put your feet here, keep your eye on the ball, bend your back, keep your left arm straight. It's just, I get so confused doing all that. My driving is rubbish. So having said that, this is why we come into the function. I want this, when I build it, to function the way I like to ride. Twig. The beauty of this bike, I find, is this engine. It's just wonderful to ride. Then it has shortcomings. It's the shortcomings we're going to deal with in the design. Alright? So, what are we going to try and do? Well, the wheelbase on this is 56 inches. And yet, amazingly, I could do stuff that I would have difficulty doing on the BSA. I think it's because of the weight distribution. You look ahead, you keep yourself balanced, and this thing just is wonderful. So it's a bit long. We can do something about that. It's a bit heavy. I must admit, when I make a mess of something and I get stuck, particularly if it's on a climb, it's a real handful to sort of get into neutral, get started, move off, etc. So losing a bit of weight would be nice, but I don't honestly think there's a lot of weight we can lose. I mean, we can put an alloy tank on it and save a couple of pounds. The Enfield frame to start with is pretty minimal. It's thin wall tubing, it's all welded, there's no castings or anything like that. Forks are going to weigh about the same. I put smaller hubs in this, so we're not going to be able to do a lot about the weight. One thing it is also is it is fat. It is wide across here. Instead of these tubes just going back to the rear suspension units, they come out. So right here, above your footrest, admittedly your knees go that way because you're bending your knees, but even so, there's not a lot of room to move there. So they're the things we're going to address. The length, the weight, and the width. I think if we can get those sorted out, this will be stunning. Now, also with this, of course, you may remember I put a BSA Bantam front hub in, widened it, and a Tiger Cub one in the back. They're remarkably good brakes. I can see why people use them at home in the pre-65 specials that they build. But we're not going to ride this in trials. We're not going to ride the next one in trials. And although the One Vintage group here has just sort of had a change of management, if you like, they were very strict about rules. They wouldn't have an exhibition class either. You know, if you'd driven 500 miles to ride and they didn't like what you'd come on, they'd just say you can't ride. They wouldn't say, well, okay, you can ride, but don't put a score in, anything like that. It was just like that. So I'm going to put disc brakes on it. That'll save us a little bit of weight, but also they'll work a bit better. And also, as I mentioned a while back, nice forks and drum brakes are getting to be very expensive. And when I checked with my friend Mike, he had several pairs of forks and disc brake wheels, which I can get off him for a very reasonable price. So okay, that's the overall plan. Shorter, lighter, thinner, slightly better suspension and brakes. Okay, so let's start and look at this more exactly in terms of some dimensions, so as we can see how we're going to get to our end point. Alright, so I've taken a bunch of measurements off the Otter because although we did a couple of slight mods, that was, you could say, a custom built trials frame. Alright, now as you know I aim for 52 inches wheelbase. That came out at 53. So this we know is 56. So we'd like to pull this in by 3 inches. I think 53 is probably, as you'll see from some of these measurements, is as good as we're going to get. Just looking at that last bit of video, my belt had slipped slightly, made me look fat. Alright, so where are we going to get these 3 inches? Alright, so what have I measured? Alright, swing arm on that is 15.5 inches long, or I say 15.5 from there to the wheel. That's 16. Oh, actually, well, it's because of the width, isn't it? So, alright, let's say we can save, we'll make a little note here. We can save half an inch there. So that's 0.5 of an inch. Then from the front wheel spindle to the frame, on that is, where are we? Front wheel spindle to frame, 18.5 inches. Alright, that is basically the same. That's 18.25. Now, you remember the Otter frame, because of the exhaust, has a swan neck there. I think I might do the same here to give me a little bit more room. If you look at the new Beta, I suppose I could take you around and look at it. The frame actually, you know, it's cast on the Beta, the petrol tank is actually, the frame is the petrol tank. But it comes right back here before there's anything going down, to give the wheel a chance to move up and down. So we're not going to save anything there. Now then, where are we going to save what else have we got? Right. Where we lose out with this engine is in a measurement round here, which is measuring from the end of the crankshaft to the main shaft. Right. There it's near enough 10 inches. On the Triumph engine, crankshaft to main shaft, 6.5 inches. So in other words, just simply in that, going from there to there, we've gained 3 inches. Well, why is that? It's because of the Enfield design. This here is the oil tank. So instead of having the gearbox right up against the crank, you know, the size of the cases need to be to accommodate the crank, you've got that, and then you've got probably about 3 inches of oil tank. Now there's nothing we can do about that. I mean, if we just had, well, if we were building it with almost any other engine, that would solve our problem. Actually, I'll bring it over here because there's something else that is very Enfield that causes us a problem. So we're going to look at this on the Triumph engine first of all, just to show you what the problem is. So the first thing we'll notice is what we've just mentioned. There, if you like, are the crankcases. There's the gearbox. You see how one is right up against the other one? That's where that 3 is. So for a start, there's 3 inches there. But the other thing is, look at this. The end of the gearbox is the end of the engine, if you like. It's flat. It can go right up against the frame here, because you've got main shaft and lay shaft, and you've got the gear change mechanism right in here. The cam plate goes in that way, and the sort of escapement mechanism, if you like, that allows for a positive stop gear change is here. Now let's go and look at the Enfield. Alright, there's the Enfield gearbox. Here's the back of the gearbox. Main shaft, lay shaft are in there, the same as they are in the Triumph one. But the gear change mechanism is in this. So look at that. See, there's the back of the gearbox where the pen is. We've got another 2-3 inches sticking out the back again. So if we were to take this engine from front to there as being the back of the gearbox, in fact, hang on, it's a measurement I didn't make, let me do that, hold on a second. Right, so measuring the Triumph from the front of the engine, which is, if you like, as far forward as we can go in the frame, or as far back as we can have the frame starting, to the back of the engine, because you'll notice that the swinging arm pivot has to be behind the engine. On the Triumph it is 14 inches. On this it's 18. So between this oil tank and the bulge there, we've pushed that swinging arm pivot 4 inches further back than it would be if we were using, say, a Triumph engine. If we had the Triumph engine mounted there, we could have the swinging arm basically here. We could have it just over 14 inches. Yeah, we could have the swinging arm there. That is what we're trying to make up. And it's all down to the engine. So, let's have a look at some other measurements. Now we come to a couple of dimensions which are affected by frame design. Now, when I was first planning to build this, as I mentioned to Charlie over an Otter, I was going to make it Otter style, the same as the Triumph was. But that actually produces a couple of problems because of having the pillar here, you know, the single tube design. The carb would tend to be pointing at it a little bit, I think, although I might get away with that. But just as this bulge in the gearbox keeps the swinging arm away from the back of the engine, having a big piece of tube there and the box that the swinging arm pivots in there, that keeps the swinging arm pivot itself away from the back of the gearbox. So we come out with a couple of dimensions which are strangely similar. For instance, from the main shaft to the rear spindle, i.e. from here to there, I'll just keep checking to make sure you can see. On this look, it is 21.5 inches. Let me check my book. It's 22 inches on the Otter. That's because the frame here, instead of having something there, comes down, so you can actually bring this up closer to the chain case. The other one is, and this illustrates it even better, from the centre of here to the pivot point for the swinging arm on the Triumph, on the Otter there, on the main shaft to swinging arm pivot, it's 6.5 inches. Here it's basically 6. So in effect, if this engine wasn't so long in this frame, it would be the 53 inches. So we're going to have to be really clever to make up space here. Now the last two measurements are seat height. The Otter is, where are we? Seat height 29 inches. This is 30 and a half. So, but you see the slope, you see, if we were probably right down, just flat down there, well, 30. And the other thing is the width across the suspension units, where are we, is 10 inches on the Otter. Let's have a look here. It's 11. So it's an inch wider to start with, but then, as I say, you can see here the straight, how it's straight, and then it goes in. On the otter, we're going from there straight to there. So with this further in, going from there to there, see, that would be, that came in a bit, going to the centre tube, it would be that much narrower here where you're sitting. What's that, 2 inches either side? So hang on, let me measure that. In fact, the seat here above, so it's the same, you see, because these are parallel, so that's 11 inches there, and here it's actually 7 inches. So yeah, 4 inches above the footrest. It's 4 inches narrower on the otter, but not that much, only an inch narrower here. It's all to do with the way these are shaped. We can obviously, we get rid of that by going straight back. Okay, so we've made all our measurements. We've found out that we cannot get back that 3 or 4 inches that's just simply the engine. So we've got to get clever. Now, not only is this 56 inches long, but the forks we're going to use have a fork offset, which this bike doesn't have. So if we had those forks on this one, it'd actually be 57 inches. So how we're going to make up, what, let's say it was 50, so we've got to make up 4 inches, basically, right? So let's start at the front and work our way back. Right, so I seem to remember when I put these forks in, I was going to use different yokes, but they did bring the wheel back, and I was worried about hitting here. So I went to these, which are a little bit further forward. Now the forks we're going to put in from the centre of the headstock here to the centre of the tube are 1.5 inches. I'm going to get in the way here, but it can't be helped, I think. Here we have almost 2.5 inches, right? So that would bring the wheel back an inch. Also, we're going to make the forks 24 degrees, my standard angle to set them at. As I say, I know there's all sorts of variables, but as soon as you get on the bike, the angle changes. When you're going downhill, it changes. When you're going uphill, it changes, etc., etc. So I've found that 24 degrees at the fork, because again, if it's an offset fork or a straight up and down fork, either I parallel with this or going at an angle with this, I find if I set it at 24, it works well. And again, this is for me to ride, okay? So if I put a bit of curve in that to give myself a little more space for the wheel to come up, there's an inch that the forks will give us. So the inch that the wheel is offset at the bottom of the fork is going to be taken into account here. But then bringing these forks in a bit, I don't know how much, see if I can measure that, hang on. Right, now this isn't going to be an exact measurement because we're going to have to try and do this one-handed. Put those that magnet will hold straight. Right, so that fork, that's probably why it handles so well. Look, that's only, God, that's 24.25. The most I'll get, wow. Well, that explains why it works so well. 24 degrees. So we're not going to gain anything moving those forks back. Alright, so our inch we've gained there, we lost because of those spindles there. We want to gain 4 inches, don't forget. Alright, so that's as much as we can get at the front. Now then, the back. So far we're not doing too well. basically we haven't gained anything trying to shorten this. But the one thing I keep looking at is this great big space in here, which amounts to 3 inches. If I could bring that swinging arm right up to the gearbox, we would get our 3 inches, but of course we can't because of this great big bulge. Now there's also a bulge on the back of this gearbox, because you remember both engines and gearboxes that I got are out of a Pashley, so that's got the little jack shaft in. Now I had a number of people say to me, oh, don't go modifying the gearbox, and you're right. There's very few of these Pashley gearboxes around, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is, when I order my various stuff, I've already checked that they have them from Hitchcock's. I'm going to order a used gearbox. They have a couple of gearboxes there, so that will actually serve, well, 3 purposes, you could say. 1, it gives me the flat back. 2, it gives me all 4 gears again. And 3, although I think I could fit them to this, it gives me the option of the lower 1st and 2nd gear that Hitchcock sell for this gearbox. So with that lower 1st and 2nd and appropriate sprockets, we can get this geared nicely. So how are we going to do this? Now this is why I went off the idea of using, well, no, not really. If I can get the carb round out of the way, what I'm going to try and do here, you see this gearbox isn't part of the engine. It's not unit construction. In fact, the gearbox isn't even made by Royal Enfield, it's made by Albion. Why, I don't know. And it's not particularly good. It's on 4 long studs. You can see the top 2 there, and there's 2 more further down. So what I was thinking of was, alright, I'm going to make up 4 longer studs. Not a lot longer, you know, say 1/4 of an inch longer. And then I'm going to make a piece which bolts onto the back of the gearbox. And that is going to be the mount for the swinging arm. Then I'm going to make it out of rectangular tube for the arms, because it'll make it easier and give me more space. That arm is going to be fine. That arm's going to be just as normal. It'll go out and then come across further down to come parallel with the longitudinal axis of the bike. This side, we're going to make it sort of dogleg a little bit. So it's going to be mounted to the equivalent of this piece, and then it's going to come out here, and then it's gone. So the rear wheel is, one of these tyres is 4 inches. So we can get away with 4.5 inches. Now if I use 3/4 inch section rectangular tube, say 3/4 by 1.5, that should be amply rigid. That's 4.5 and 1.5, that's 6 inches, and this is a 6-inch rule. Right? We can get right in like that. Hang on, let me, where's that piece of flat gone? There it is. If this is approximately that, of course, is I'm not going to be able to use a long piece. We'll just use a 12-inch piece to put on the tyre. Right. There it is. So this ruler actually is what? That's 1 inch wide. So that's about with the tyre. I could take it almost to there. And actually that is the tyre could come almost to there. And that's bringing it forward 4 inches, right? So I'm only looking for 3. Actually, it's more. That was nearly 5 inches. There's 4 inches. Look at that. This is the tyre, not this side. Tyre would be there. I can make up the whole of that 4 inches, I think. Certainly the 3 inches. Now then, we're going to go to drawings because doing it this end gives us some real problems. I need to be as close to this side as I can get. So I don't want to have things like wheel spindles sticking through, enough space to put a nut on, all sorts of stuff like that. We've got to get really clever over this side. This side, we've got masses of space, we can do all sorts of things. But here, we don't have much space for the swinging arm to come in. Alright, so let me tell you, I'll show you on a drawing first of all. Alright, while I was working on doing a sort of drawing of the whole thing, which proved to be a bit technical, in fact, God, it's 25 to 5. It got me thinking about things because this has one major problem, which I'm going to explain. But it did make me realise that I could make this with a central pillar, which makes it a little bit easier to make. So, what we want is to have the swinging arm pivot right up here. Okay? It's actually got to go about ½ inch off because of the way the casting is. But this is really difficult to hold and let you see. So anyway, that's got to go in there like that. I hope my hand isn't in the way too much. As close to the gearbox as we can get it. Then, as I said, this arm is easy enough to go onto it. This arm is going to have to sort of kink in to clear this and then go out. So it's going to come off this and then go out and then go down to clear the tyre. Now hang on, I'm going to look at that bit of video to make sure you could see that. Right, I didn't get too much in the way there. So, if we're going to have our pivot right inside here, we can't put a bolt through. See, that's the problem here. Closest we could get is putting our bolt through there. That doesn't gain as much. So I had to think of a way to do it. Now, as I said, we're going to make the actual pivot mounting bolt onto these 4 studs here. So we're going to make them in 2 pieces. I'm going to use the Igus bearings. You remember those plastic sort of bearings on this? And I think you can see that. Sorry about that sudden ending there. Battery went out and I didn't have the other one with me and it was late in the day, so this is the next morning. And by the way, the noise you can hear is the air conditioning. I've switched it on because it's a bit hot. Alright, so here's where we were. I was showing you this drawing. So we're going to make 2 of these. Now it's almost like a piece of angle iron with a top, but it'll be made out of 1/4 inch, I think. These 2 holes here are the studs that come through the gearbox, right? So we'll have one like that and a mirror image on the other side. This here, welded on there, is what the swinging arm cross piece will go onto. This isn't actually going to be the pivot because my words are escaping me. Early morning. We're going to have a bushing inside the swinging arm, right? So the swinging arm will have its Argus bearing on it, and then it'll have a hardened piece in the centre, and the hardened piece in the centre will slip onto that. So the swinging arm isn't going to be moving on this. This is going to be the equivalent of a bolt going through, and then there'll be a bushing, or then there'll be a solid hard surface piece if you think about the BSA one, and then the Argus bearing will run on that, which will be inside. So there'll be one on these and the other side. So what we'll do, you see, is we'll have the two of these, we'll stick them onto the ends of the swinging arm, and then that will be put into here and bolted onto these studs. Right? Now the holes in the top, I haven't decided what I'm going to do with the bottom yet, because we have some bottom engine mounts, but we're going to look at those later. This piece here, of course, will strengthen this up, and that will be here. So we'll have that piece there, which the swinging arm will have gone to on both sides, and then on the top there'll be a flat piece with a couple of holes in. That will then bolt to the frame, or the frame will bolt to that. So the frame will be bolted at the front of the engine, and then it will be bolted onto there on a really strong design piece, which is going to be firmly bolted, because actually I think these are 7/16 bolts, studs in here, so it's all going to be really rigid. Then that, as I say, because this, hang on, because the carb here actually points at an angle, so with a little bit of changing, for instance, where the silencer is, we're going to be able to have the well, I know I'm waffling this morning. The engine has the oil tank. We don't have to build an oil tank. This is like having a Japanese engine with a wet sump, only it's dry sump, but it does have the oil tank in the engine, so I don't have to build an oil tank to fit in here. So I can make an airbox, and we just have a tube going from there to the airbox, so we'll be fine. So I can have a centre column here, which will then have a cross piece on it, all welded up, and that will bolt to this piece that's bolted on the back of the engine that holds the swinging arm. Then from that we'll have our tubes that go up there to triangulate the frame. It's going to be a bit like the Vincent design, actually, because the Vincent had that had a cantilever type system, you know, what, 50 years before Yamaha came up with it? Actually probably more than that, but no, 50 years before. So the swinging arm is going to pivot off the back of the engine, and then the frame is going to bolt to the engine. If that's not clear here, it'll become clear as we begin to make things. But that sorts that problem out, alright? And then, as I say, I can't really, let me swing you up a little bit, get ready for this, there you go. So as I say, we'll have the piece coming down that will bolt to there, and then we will triangulate to the rear suspension. From there to there, from there to there. And then the upright will be the other part of the triangle. Okay, you with me so far? Very good. Alright, I don't think I can tell you any more about what's going to happen. That's our plan. So the next stage is for me to go and rummage around and find what we've got and start to make a list of what we need to buy. Right, we're back because I was just watching that last bit of video. That's how I do my editing, really. That's why I don't do any editing in the house. I always make sure that each piece of video has got what I want. And it suddenly struck me that all that for the swinging arm will work perfectly. I think that's really solved the problem. It's going to be rigid, all the rest of it. But I was suddenly thinking, right, you know, I've got a piece here, I've got these pieces there. Where am I going to put the footrests? Right, if I've got this sort of piece here, holding the swinging arm, and then the frame just drops onto it and bolts on, where am I going to put the footrests? So I'm going to have to give that some more thought, and probably the design for that will finalise. Oh, I'm wearing the paint away with my boots. We'll finalise when we're actually got this all in the jig with the engine there, and we'll make the swinging arm part first, because that is going to be completely separate, and then we can decide on this. You see, the way the Enfield frame works, this top tube goes all the way back to here. You probably can't see it, and then there's a cross piece connecting this to the centre spine to the other one of these on the other side. So this, I mean, it's beautifully made, but this is all one piece. Bend there, bend in a different direction there, going down. And then there are two mountings down there, mounting points. There's one which goes just into some plates, and then the plates come and they mount into mountings on the bottom of the gearbox around the engine, I think it is. Yeah. The plates mount on the back of the crankcase through, and then through the through the gearbox casting. So what we might have to do actually is, I could basically make another Royal Enfield frame, you know. Very similar. Or think of something, have this piece, see, it doesn't have to be all this clever stuff, but I could have that piece come down, curve under, bolt to the engine, and then have this triangulated in there, just down to there, just to give me a place to mount the footrests and the brake pedal. But as I say, we will think about that, but it's something that just struck me, so I'm going to have it at the back of my mind when we get to that point. Alright, let's go and gather some bits and pieces. Alright then, I pulled all the Enfield stuff out. Let's see what we've got. Alright, first of all, we've got one very nasty, rusty crank, conrod piston. So, it is the long drive side crankshaft to take the alternator, which is what we want because we're going to put electronic ignition on it. We're going to use the one I bought for the B50 where I made a mess of the order, and instead of getting the one with the generator coils, I just got the ignition only one because it's the same unit. So we've got that to go on there. That's over there on the shelf. Right. When I built my Enfield, I had a couple of people mention, oh, you should use the shorter one, the magneto engine, so that you have narrower crankcases, well, narrower chain case. Well, to be honest, I can't see the logic in that. For the sake of losing, I don't know, an inch or so in width, high up and well back, if your technique is so bad that you're battering into things out there, then you need to practice. For the sake of losing that bit of width, I'm doing away with a great big heavy old magneto, putting on a brand new electronic ignition. And I mean my Enfield starts beautifully. No fiddling around with advance and retard if you've got one of the older ones. No mechanical bob weights if you've got a newer one, so I can't see that. So anyway, what we need, unfortunately we can do, is change them, because when I got this stuff from, God, I can't remember his name, up in Canada, but he used to be president maybe still is, of the Enfield Owners Club. He's a very accomplished machinist. He had made, I believe he said this was tool steel, new pair of crank wheels. So we'll press this apart because we're going to put a new big end in, and when we've got it apart we'll press these out and we'll use these nice new flywheels. So let's move that up there out of the way. What else have we got? Timing cover. No oil pump in it. I've got a box of bits, so I'm hoping there'll be an oil pump in that. A cylinder head. And if memory serves me right, this cylinder head needs some work. Because you may remember the rockers are mounted in blocks which bolt on, and then the cover goes on. And I think a couple of these mounting holes, yeah, I think both of them, they've been drilled out to 5/16 or something, so we'll repair them. Now I'm almost sure there was something else. Oh, I don't know where you can see, look how small that is. Where's my ruler? 350. It's a 1/16 choke. What's 1 1/16? Well, 1 inch is 25.4, and a 16th is, where are we? 1/4 is 6 millimeter, 1/8 is 3 millimeter, 1.5, so it's 25. It's 27 millimeter. So that's why we're going to put a small carb on there. So, see, that's got the little bolts in. Yeah, these are completely screwed up. So also, well, we have to go through our box of bits. So there's a head. Now we have 2 sets of crankcases. We'll be changing the main bearings. There, by the way, is the oil tank. Right, there's the filler. I think one of these sets of kit. Oh, that's got the tappets, cam followers, whatever you want to call them in. No camshafts. We don't have to worry about any of this because we're not driving a magneto. No, that looks alright. No chunks broken off it. 832 is stamped on that. 106 is stamped on that, so they aren't even a matching pair of crankcases. But we do have another pair. Again, it's got the tappets in it. This actually, if any of you are doing 350 Enfields, this has got a distributor on it. All 3 I have had the distributor. That's why the crankshaft has got is the longer one to do the alternator. Actually, one Constellation I had the distributor on it, and one Constellation had a magneto. So I got that filler cap. They don't look damaged at all, and 1, 2, 4, they're actually a matching pair. Not that it bothers me. So I got a pair of crankcases. Oh, look at that. Should know better at my age. Let me just check that you've been able to see everything I've been telling you here. I think so. Hang on, I'm going to check the video. Yes, you can see all that. It's just struck me, I've forgotten the hat again. Been so long not wearing one that I keep forgetting to get it. Alright, oh, There's the little doodad that goes on top of the chain case for the wires to go through. Speaking of which, one inner chain case, one outer chain case. Right, boxes of bits. What have we got here? We have got bearings, which obviously with oh. There's valve springs. There's right. That's good. There's the top alloy pieces, and all the collets are in there, and the one bottom piece that was missing. So I'll get some new valve springs, but that's good. Those bits are there. There's the end caps for the oil pump. What is that? Got to think about that. I think it's pressure release spring or something like that. Not totally sure what that is. They are, well, it doesn't matter, although they look brand new ones. They're the shafts that the camshafts run on. There's one rocker in its block. Now, if you cast your minds back, I think I had 4 of these. And I thought to myself, great, 2 engines. And when I checked, I had, did I have 4 4 exhaust ones? Because they're not, they're sort of symmetrical. One goes that way, but the other, they aren't, see, they're shaped, so you can't just turn it round and put that on the other side. They're matched pairs. But I remember buying new one of these, and they're an updated version for the later Enfields from India, and they've got O-ring seals and things like that. So I'll probably have to buy it. I think the rockers came with the blocks. It was a complete set and they weren't that expensive. So we know we've got stuff to finish the cylinder head off with. Well, for valves, I should be making a list. Let me make just a quick list. So I know I'm going to need rockers complete. I mean, I don't want to waste time in the video writing things down. Camshafts, or well, not so much the shafts as cam wheels, valve springs. Okay, so let's put that back in there. I'll put that in there so I don't lose it. Very good. Well, hopefully I've got another 2 boxes. Keep our this one's heavy. Now keep our fingers crossed. We've got lots of good stuff. Aha! Clutch. Remember, it's got that great big ball bearing in there. Clutch springs, which obviously will change. Clutch centre. And these are the bottom engine plates. You can see they're bent. Not going to use these, and the reason I didn't use these on the other bike was because I made alloy ones up, about a 1/4 inch alloy. We're going to do that. But what I'm going to use these for, because they're damaged or whatever, is I'm going to make a little engine stand. So we'll leave them. So there's the drive off the end of the crankshaft. various bits and pieces. So that's a clutch in there. So obviously we'll buy new clutch plates, but all that's got to be checked up on to see that everything works. Now then, what's this in this bag? Gear change mechanism. The weird old gear change mechanism. Now, sorry if you're watching again, I've forgotten your name. You remember that very nice chap from Germany who made me a sprocket for the Indian Trailblazer, because that Albion gearbox wasn't like the standard Albion gearbox. That's right, yeah, that one, because it was possibly for police use. It was out of an Indian Chief, not the Trailblazer, the engine. It was, can't remember which it is, 5 splines rather than 4 splines. Anyway, he very kindly made me a rear sprocket. And in another one of his videos, because he built the 350 Enfield Trials bike, he did a mod to turn the gear change around. We'll come back to it. I'll put a link in the video at the end if I can find it. But I want to do that for this bike as well. So great, there's all the gear change bits, which at some point we will modify. Alright, this is looking reasonably good. If I can find an oil pump, I'd be very happy. Oh, this one's heavy as well. Ow. Gearbox. So we're not worried about this, because I say we're going to get another gearbox. Yeah, they're all the gearbox internals and the inner cover and outer cover. So we're not bothered about that, any of that. As I said, there's the 2 shafts, and instead of the gear change mechanism being in here, this is part of it. It's up in here. The gear change lever moves it, and it's strange. It's maybe why Albion gearboxes aren't so brilliant. Alright, so we're not going to need any of that. Right, so I'll go through and make a thorough list of engine stuff. Now then, what did I do with that? I also spent about $800 down at Mike's. So we have got 1 pair upside down forks. We're going to use some off, was it a Fantic, something like that, which weren't upside down, which I thought would look quite nice. But although I had the wheels for them, Mike couldn't find all the parts to make up a complete set of forks, but he did have these and the wheels for these. So we swapped the wheels over, and so we have our upside down forks, exactly the same as we put on the B50. Yokes. Then handlebar clamps. Now what we're going to put on it, we're going to go a bit modern. We're going to put the fat bars on. If you're not familiar with these type of competition bars, what they are is they're 7/8 as normal at the end where the controls go, but as they come down into the middle they get fatter. So I don't know, they're quite thick, they might be an inch. Well, there it is. So they're 7/8 where the handlebar levers and grips and everything go on, and they are 1.1/8 or 1.16 in the middle. So there's no crossbar, and they are incredibly strong. They don't bend. There's a disc. One wheel didn't have a disc on it. Then we have Rear brake caliper, which I think we've got to mod slightly. We've got to modify the mounting plate. Memory serves me right. Rear brake caliper. Oh, here's the thing. This is a 4-piston brake caliper. This I'm going to put on the B50. And the 2-piston one I'm going to put on this one, because that will be ample for that, but I thought that brake would be a better brake on the B50. There is the rear master cylinder. There's the front brake master cylinder with its lever. And there's a new set of steering head bearings. Right? So, I'll finish making up my list for these. Actually, I started to say that if anyone had a 350, I think I have 3 distributors, which I'm probably, I know I'm never ever going to use. I think they all have their timing wheel. If anybody is in need of one of these, get in touch with me. Need an end cover, but get in touch with me and pay the shipping and I'll send you one, because as I said, they're no use to me whatsoever. I also have 6, I think it's 6 cast iron barrels for 350. So I need an alloy barrel from Hitchcock's. Going to boost their profits again this year, so I need to order an alloy barrel, new piston, big end, main bearings. So we're going to buy gearbox from them. There'll be a new primary chain. Looks, yeah, I didn't come across oil pumps, so I'm going to have to buy all the bits. Well, it's not much that goes in there now. I've got the end covers, oil pump stuff, so I've got to get all that ordered. In the meantime, I can clean all this, get ready. Camshafts. Might use the other pair. Anyway, so I'll order all that stuff, and then I'll also order some tube, some chrome moly tube, and put this away, put the frame jig out. Okay, so I think that is as much as we can do now. I'll certainly be able to get all the frame tube and stuff like that. That's not a big delay. It's going to be a while before we need to get to the engine, so we can start building the frame next week. Alright, did I want to tell you anything else? No, I don't think so. So, can you see me? So I can say goodbye? Oh, old man. Actually, my knee's pretty good. So I'll get stuff ordered, and next week we will start making the frame. So until then, you stay safe and enjoy yourselves.